What's going on, gamers? It's Village here from Beneath the Veil and welcome back to the channel. This week I wanted to go over a video on Tusk. So Tusk is one of my most played heroes. There's about 1 or 2 games difference between Tusk and Hoodwink being my most played. And having looked around to see what other people have posted in a similar vein on guides for Tusk, a lot of them do really good work in explaining how he works in the laning phase and in the game in general. But there are a few things that I only found out after I'd played maybe like 80 to 100 games that were never made apparent based on skill descriptions, and you can always hold Alt, which will give you additional tips. But there's quite a few things that aren't covered in here, as well as a few things that are. So, for example, with Snowball, and we'll go over Snowball a lot because there's a lot to do with Snowball. But yeah, the main reason that you'd use this is to save allies, and we'll go over that momentarily. So, things to start off with, I think the first thing to look at is Tag Team. With Tag Team, it used to be meta that you would prioritize leveling Tag Team first. There are still lane partners where you would consider this. So, for example, if you're laning with a Wind Ranger, if you max tag team early, then by the time she's got her ult, you've got normally like level 3, for example. So each time she's attacking, she's doing an additional 70 damage. So that can be really strong. The other thing to consider is the damage from tag team does also get multiplied by your Walrus Punch crit. So it is really important to, whenever you go to use Walrus Punch, try and remember to use tag team if you've got it off cooldown. Otherwise, if you don't, and that's fine. Let's go over the Ice Shards first. So the biggest issue that I see with new players to Tusk is that they don't fully understand how Ice Shards works beyond the fact that, yes, it throws out a projectile that creates an impassable barrier. They don't really understand the full mechanics of what it's doing and how best to use it. So what I'll typically see is, say if you have an enemy that's running towards the ramp, right, a new player will try and like cut them off, and quite often what will happen is by the time they've cast it, because there's a projectile that has to like move a distance, right? They can quite often, if they've got boots, they can actually end up running past the Ice Shards point. So what I always recommend that new players do is that instead of using Ice Shards to trap them behind, to trap somebody within an area, if they instead start thinking about cutting off retreat points and forcing the enemy to go somewhere else. So with Ice Shards, good thing to know is that wherever the point of your mouse cursor is where the very back wall of it will be. So you see there, that's bang on, this icicle forms exactly where my cursor is. So it's actually always best practice to, if you can get the angle, to place it right at the bottom of the ramp, because then your enemy can actually get trapped in the stairwell, and they can't obviously move until that goes away. Other things to consider is that if you don't have the angle to get that clear semicircle this way, for example, because I'd need to be over here, what you can do instead is that you can use Ice Shards to cut off the stairs to help an ally escape. So if you have an ally that's retreating and you're on this angle, you just tell them to keep running, and then you can fire off an Ice Shards behind them, and then that'll give them an escape, and that will create, again, impassable terrain that enemies can't get up. The other thing with Ice Shards, it's an advanced move, but there are situations where if you're smart about pathing, you can use Ice Shards to force yourself over. So how that works is generally it's best practice to get a directional move command. So if you go into your settings and then in your advanced hotkeys, there should be a directional move. So I have mine bound to C, and what that will do is that will move you in a direction without pathfinding. So if we go back, you can see that if I just right click over here normally, Tusk wants to path around, but if I hold C and then move in that direction, it's just going to send me straight to it until I hit a wall. The reason you want to do that is that you can then force movement. So with Ice Shards, if you're right up against a ledge, and if you cast your Ice Shards with the point being inside the semicircle against the wall, then it should, normally, it doesn't always work. So if you get the angle just right, so something like this, yeah, then I can force myself over the ledge. So that's something to keep in mind. It's something that Nisha famously did recently in, I think it was the Lima Major, where he went and contested Roche, snatched Roche, and then when they killed him off, he managed to Ice Shards himself out of the Roche pit after trying to tumble his toy out. You can also, with tumble his toy, I'll just show you. So yeah, in the Roche pit, if you do directional move, and then you tumble his toy, you can actually tumble his toy out. So he had the right idea, he just did it at the slightly wrong angle at the time. I think he was too far away from the wall when he did it. But yeah, you can tumble his toy pretty much anywhere in the Roche pit. And then of course Roche is going to do that to me, but If I snowball them, then I can get my Tumble's Toy off cooldown, then I can get out. So yeah, directional move, really, really strong, especially with Tusk. It's one of those things where I can probably shard myself onto the high ground as well. If I do it like this, and then, yeah. So you just need to remember to pop it inside of the circle, and you need to make sure that you're popping it on the front side, because otherwise, if Tusk has to turn around, then he'll put it in the other direction. So obviously that allowed me to come back down again. That's always good to know. The other trick, let me just take myself back over here. The other trick with Tusk is that if you want to, say I was wanting to run down or up this ramp and I was being pursued and I was on my own, right? There is a way, if you train with Shift Q commands, that you can shards yourself off and not have the enemy wander by. So what you need to do is, if you wander up and then you Shift Q eye shards and then you keep running, so you Shift Q more move commands, then what you can do is you can create that behind you, right? Similarly, let's go back the other way. So if I go here, move my mouse slightly in front of where I just was, then you can shards. So you just need to be aware that you need to issue Shift Q commands. So I would always go, do my move command, move slightly forward, Shift Q, eye shards, and then do another movement command. I always used to Shift Q it, but I've just discovered that I don't always have to. But yeah, if you can get used to that, you see I still mess it up sometimes. I've just jumped on, so I've still got to warm up a little bit. But yeah, it's always just a slight movement of the mouse, just very slightly forward of where you issue the move command. If you do it too far, then no matter what, you'll always, because you got to remember that this is a projectile, right? So if you don't cast it right in front of yourself, then you're not going to end up blocking yourself off. So always just slightly forward of where you put the move command, and then you'll be able to shard yourself off pretty much every single time. So that's pretty much everything for ice shards. We move on to Walrus Punch. So with Walrus Punch, it seems pretty self-explanatory. You do essentially an auto attack, and then you boost them up in the air. Important thing to know about this is that it does have True Strike, so especially in the current meta that we're in, where lots of heroes are building Radiance, you don't have to worry about this Walrus Punch not hitting, because it does have True Strike. It will always hit somebody like PA who's got natural evasion. If Wind Ranger uses Wind Run, this will still hit her. But the important thing to consider with Walrus Punch is that due to the time that they're in the air, that they're stunned, you don't by default get an extra attack. You do, however, if you level up this level 10 talent for 0.5 second Walrus Punch stun duration. So you can see here, if I close that again, you can hear that second auto attack is registering. So the reason that is important is that later comes into play with other items. Say if you're going core Tusk, you'd want to build other armor reducing items, and getting in that second auto attack can often be the difference between life and death. Other thing to consider is that you can get this 12% chance Walrus Punch talent, which will grant a 12% chance on every auto attack to proc another Walrus Punch. So you can sometimes get situations where, and this is great when you go in on a save support like Dazzle, where you initiate and then you Walrus Punch him, and then while he's in the air you actually proc another Walrus Punch. That is something that can happen and is worth thinking about, and that's why in this current meta this talent here is much more beneficial than the tag team damage. It's just the way it shifts. It used to be that you'd always go the 25 tag team damage, but over time as things have changed there's been more value in this additional stun duration. It helps other stunning heroes set up as well. So yeah, just really, really strong. The other thing to note about Walrus Punch is that you can put it on autocast. So if you're doing like blink initiations for example, and you're not 100% sure that you can consistently land the blink and then issue the Walrus Punch attack, you can just have it autocast, so that if I had a blink for example, I can blink in and then I just automatically goes off. So yeah, that's something to consider, is that you can have that autocast. I typically don't because there's other combos that I like to do, but we'll get into that shortly. I've been over everything except Snowball. So Snowball is a really, really strong ability. The reason being, so it doesn't actually, there's a lot in here that it does state. So it can't be cast while rooted, or at least as we covered before. Snowball will break apart a maximum of 3 seconds after launch. The Snowball can be launched early. It doesn't carry illusions, but will carry Meepo clones and other units that Tusk controls. And then each Meepo clone added to the Snowball will add its own bonus damage. Allies can click on a Snowball to add themselves to it. So there are a bunch of situations where Snowball is really, really effective. You can, for example, so say Ursa is being kited, right, and you need a way to help Ursa get in, you can Snowball and then bring him in and then launch it. You don't have to wait for the full duration of Snowball to channel. So you can see I've got launch Snowball here, so I can just click it earlier, or I can leave it for the next duration. There are certain reasons why you'd want to do that, which we'll go over very soon. So a couple of things that make Snowball really strong. We get Mars up and running, and he does his whole combo, right, where he goes, Arena Spear, I can Snowball in and then save the Ursa, and that can often be the difference between life and death. Other situations where this is really strong is obviously if Legion Commander's got duel, she can duel the target and you can save them. So, while the taunt was still going there, typically you're not going to get on top of them right as the duel starts. You normally get partway through, so more often than not you can save somebody from dying to the duel, so that you at least don't give Legion Commander extra damage. Those are the two that I want to cover off there. With Disruptor, he's got Static Storm and Kinetic Field. So typically what will happen is, say that, let's put him on max level. So say that there's Static Storm going, and then there's a Kinetic Field as well. If I'm outside and I can cast it on an ally, say that they're running away, right? I can actually pull my ally out of the Static Storm, and that's the same with, I can pull them out of the geomagnetic grip, not geomagnetic grip. I can pull them out of the Kinetic Field. So that's something to consider with Disruptors. He is a hero where AoE abilities you can shut down. There are a few abilities that you can't pull heroes out of with Snowball, that being Faceless Void's Chronosphere, Batrider's Flaming Lasso, and Enigma Black Hole. But you can obviously, if you're not caught in the Black Hole, you can Snowball in to cancel the Black Hole unless he's got BKB. With Faceless Void, if they're in the Chronosphere, they're in there, you can't help them, unfortunately. And with Flaming Lasso, same thing. If they're in the Lasso, you can't help them. All you can do is try and disrupt the Batrider in some way. And then finally, two special points that I want to bring up. So with Bane, if Bane uses Fiend's Grip, so this goes through BKB, so there's no way that your allies can avoid being Fiend's Gripped. They can avoid being Nightmared, because that doesn't pierce spell immunity, but they can always be Fiend's Gripped even during a BKB. If they are, what you then can do is you can jump in and you can Snowball save. The second that you Snowball save, it pulls them out of Fiend's Grip. So the reason that's so painful for Bane is that, number one, it's a 6-second channel at max level. Number two, they can get a level 25 talent to bump that up another 5 seconds. So they can get that up to 11 seconds. They can also then, if they get the Scepter, they can use Fiend's Grip and actually cancel their own channel and still have it going for that full 11 seconds. The exception to that is if, so you'll see here, even with everything else, once that's ended, if Bane were to Fiend's Grip and then I Snowball save, the Scepter illusions are gone, Bane's channel is cancelled. So Tusk is one of the few absolute hard counters to Fiend's Grip, because even if you might think that I can't pull in an ally who's BKB'd, but if he BKBs, he gets Fiend's Grip, I can pull him in while he's BKB'd and still break the channel. So whenever there's a Bane on the enemy team, he has to Nightmare the Tusk, otherwise he can't get an ult off, unless Tusk has blown the Snowball already. So those are things to be aware of and play around, is that if I know that I have to use the Snowball for a save, then I can't use it in a team fight the same way that I'd want to use it, for example, to initiate, do something like that, where I pull in the Ursa to go and attack somebody. The other thing to be aware of is that if you're playing that save style, then you have to hold it, because you are limited in how you can use it. And then last, I want to go over Necro, because this is one of the hardest saves that you have. So there you go. So you can save Reaper's Scythe. That is just really strong, especially in the current meta with Necrophos being in vogue again, because Radiance is cheaper. That's just really good to know, is that you can save a Reaper's Scythe. Provided it's not used on you, it does take a bit of quick, figuring out of who's the target. But once you know that it's not you, then you got a bit of breathing room to use it. But yeah, obviously if it's used on you, then you're stunned, so you're done. So that is all of the sort of hero things I want to go over. Other things to consider is that if you are going up against any sort of projectile stun, so any sort of projectile stun, where is a projectile stun? Sven, here we go. If we bring in a Sven, give him a level of Stormhammer, if he goes to use it, oh, if I had the right hero selected, if he were to go and stun the Ursa, I can pull him in, and then save him from that stun. Same with Vengeful Spirit. Yeah, there's a bunch of projectile stuns. You just get used to them over time, that yeah, if they're cast from far enough away, you can often dodge them. Same with Ogre Magi Ignite. Any sort of projectile, you can use Snowball in the main part to disjoint that. So the other thing to mention as well is that whenever you've got Blink online, you do get essentially a get out of jail free card most of the time. Say I got jumped, right, and I was being stunned to death or whatever. If I Snowball, I can Snowball to get my Blink off cooldown, and then as soon as the channel's done, I can Blink somewhere. So yeah, I always try and Blink on high grounds if I can, and then I can just TP out. Otherwise, blinking over ledges is really strong, all that sort of stuff. So again, so just Snowball, 3, 2, 1, and then I can just spam my Blink command, and then I'll get out for free. Really strong escape mechanism on Tusk in particular. So the next thing I want to go over is little combinations of abilities that you can use as Tusk. You've got your initial initiate with Snowball. The other thing to know about Snowball is that while you're inside of Snowball, you can use various other abilities. So you can throw out a Shards. You can activate Tag Team so that when you come out, Tag Team is active. You don't have to wait until you've popped out. The only thing that you can't do while inside of Snowball is Walrus Punch. That's the only thing. You have to wait until you're out to be able to do that. The reason this is really effective is that I will show you momentarily that when you get your Scepter, there is a really cool initiation that you can do to start a pick-off if you're being sieged, for example. So let's go over all the basic ones first. You have into Ice Shards. But in the laning phase, when you don't have your ult up yet, you can often just Snowball in, and then during the stun, you can put the Ice Shards right behind them and then attack them with Tag Team. You've got your Snowball initiation into Tag Team, into Walrus Punch, and then while they're in the air, your Ice Shards behind them. Once you've got your Blink Dagger, you can go Tag Team into Blink Punch, Shards, Snowball. And then the fun starts once you get the Scepter as well. So once you got Scepter online, you get access to Walrus Kick. So this kicks the closest enemy unit in a drawn direction. So what I can do, so there's things that you can do. Say if you're in a fight and you have some big tank that you just need to get out of the fight, you can just kick them anywhere. So I often do that to like a Timbersaw, for example. However, say if I was playing up on the high ground, right, and I was wanting to get a pick off. So let's pretend that this is my base, right? What I can do, I can blink out, Snowball, and then I can Walrus Kick during the Snowball, and then I can Snowball out, and I can Ice Shards off the ramp. So if you get that timing a little bit cleaner than I did, you can completely cut off the ramp so that reinforcements can't come in. So blink, Snowball, kick, launch, Ice Shards, and then he's trapped in, and you'd still have your Walrus Punch at that point. So that is insanely strong. I have literally turned losing games around by just getting free picks like that endlessly, because the Walrus Kick is only a 12-second cooldown. Your Snowball is 15-second before any talents. You can take talents to decrease that. So if I'm playing utility and I'm going that Scepter build, I won't actually go 12% Walrus Punch chance. I'll actually go 8-second Snowball cooldown instead. And I'll just be playing around my Blink Dagger, which has a 15-second cooldown. By the time my Blink Dagger is back up, all of these other abilities will be back up. So on a 15-second cooldown, I can be constantly setting up single pickoffs. And it's just really important that, you know, your team aren't showing you are the first one in, because if you can get quickly in Snowball, then there's actually a decent amount of range before they can get out of that kick. You can see if I hover over that, you know, if I'm right on top of them, you know, by the time they get to here, normally that's already, I've queued up the kick at that point. So yeah, kick is really, really strong. When it first came out, I thought it was a bit of a meme, but then I started playing with it and I was like, oh, actually, this is really, really strong, especially in combination with his other skills. And yeah, I think that's everything. If there's any questions, as always, leave them in the comments below and either me or one of the team will get back to you. Besides that, I hope this video helped and I'll see you in the next one.